Jenkins Boat Works presents Lead Keel Mold, Part 1. Today I'm working on trying to set up at least figure out these dimensions for the lead keel mold. We have to build this mold so it'll look like that, so we can melt down the lead and pour it in there to make the keel. These plans just leave a lot to be desired, and so the obvious answer is buy the book. That helps explain it. Well, when it comes to pouring the lead keel, the ballast keel on the deadwood, steps 199 and 200, and that's all it tells you. Honestly, it's kind of frustrating, but the fact of the matter is that's why I'm doing all this video, because anybody that wants to try to figure this out and do it, you have to decipher the plans and then try to figure out what you're doing. This board here, you'll notice it's got a curve to it. It kind of curves off like that. That is supposed to mate up with the bottom of the keel, because it is kind of curved. Okay, I've got this pine board on here that I'm going to use for the bottom of my mold, and I've got some of these big chunks of lead on here to hold it down and kind of try to bend it a little bit. It's too wide. That's like a 1x10. So I'm going to have to cut it down, but I have to figure out how to cut it down. So I need to know what the dimensions are at each station to cut this thing out. So what I've done is try to decipher the plan. And it just doesn't tell you what a lot of these numbers are, but here's some helpful hints. It does tell you the scale is 3 to 1, so 3 inches equals 1 foot. Now, what I've figured out after thinking about it for a minute is that means that a 1/4 inch equals 1 inch, or 4 inches, 1 inch equals 4 inches, and 1 foot equals 3 inches, which is what it tells you. So what you can do, we know that in between two stations is 15 inches. So where they show, say, stations 16 and 14, that should be 15 inches in there. Well, you can see that it's about 3 3/4 inches. So if you figure that a 1/4 inch is actually 1 inch, you come here and you're 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, 8 inches, 1 foot. 1 foot equals 3 inches. Now you got 3 more quarters, so 13, 14, 15 inches. So we know that's right. The reason this is important is because when you get to places like this here on the end, it says here that it's 5.5 inches back to here and back to the inside of where the lead will pour, but it doesn't tell you what the distance is here. Well, you can look at it and go, well, if that's 5.5, that's probably about 3. So I'm figuring, well, that should be about 12 inches on this bottom part of this section. So if I put the rule on there, I can see that it is 1, 2, 3, 4 inches, 8 inches, 9, 10, about 11 inches. I put 12 in there just because I want to make sure I have plenty that's extra in case I don't want to cut it short. Now, so we got 12 inches there. We got 15 more in between these two stations, 15 in between here, and 15 here. 15 times 3 is 45. Plus 12 is 57. And then we've got about 9 inches down here in this last section. Well, I added it all up. 45 and 9/11, 65. 5 foot 60 inches, so add an inch, you make it 5.5. So we're going to make this bottom part that we're going to bend here 5.5 feet. I went ahead and did the math and figured it out on this part up here. So that's going to be about 13 inches, 15 inches on this one, and coming down here another about 11.5. I just rounded that up and I came out at 40 inches for that piece. The important thing to understand about this is that this goes back to like station 18 and even all the way back to station 20. But your dead wood has to be built to fill in underneath here, which I haven't begun to figure that out yet. Alright, this is getting long, but the point is that it's confusing. Okay, now the next thing, it's confusing, but I'm figuring it out. Okay, so the next thing I know is that how do we figure out how wide to cut this board for this bottom board? This bottom board. Well, here it tells you that the inside amount is 3.5, and we know that the thickness of the boards on the side is 3/4 of an inch. It says use 7/8, but that's not what dimensional lumber is these days. I bought these 1x boards, like here. That's 1x10, I believe. Well, it's 3/4 of an inch thick. 3/4 of an inch on each side is 1.5 inches. So add 1.5 inches to the 3.5 is 5 inches. So at roughly station 6, coming up just a little bit, I'm going to make this thing 5 inches. So I'm going to find the center point of the board, measure out 2.5 inches and draw a line. And we're going to do that for each station. Number 10 is going to have to be 7 5/8. 12 is 8 1/8. 14 is, I don't know what it is. What is 14? 14 is add 1.5 inches to 7 1/4, 7 3/4. So anyway, so I figured all those out. You see here, here's one. This one's 4 7/8. Add 1 4/8, 6 3/8. Well, so anyway, so once I get those plotted out on here, on this board, then I'll cut that out, and I should have something that matches up fairly well with the oak keel that's on there that this is sitting on top of. So we got all the dimensions plotted out on here, and basically what I did was I drew a center line down the board and then figured out the half breadths. So if it was supposed to be 6 inches wide total, we went 3 inches off of one side of the center line and 3 off the other. And so on for each station, and then cut it out with the jigsaw. So I left this here overnight with these lead weights on here, hoping that would kind of bend that down. So that's how that part's turned out so far. Now the next thing to do is to figure out how to make the base piece. It calls for 2x6, this here. I'm a little concerned about doing that because the other thing you have to do is you have to put the center board boards in here so that when you pour the lead, it doesn't fill this whole thing up. You have to have the center board in here because the center board has to come through the keel. So if that mounts directly in the middle of the bottom of this, in the inside, and I also want to mount this somewhere near the middle, I haven't figured out exactly how to do that. I may not use 2x6, I may use 2 1x6 and do it on closer to the edges so that it actually could stand up on its own too. And then that way I'd be able to screw in from the bottom into the part that's for the center board. So we'll see. All right, more as we figure out more. Thanks for watching. If you like and subscribe. Also, check out Jenkins Boat Works on Facebook.